In this episode, a young Colombian woman survives a shipwrecking in the Caribbean Sea. She and fellow passengers manage to climb aboard the ship's lifeboat, but her ordeal isn't over yet. In fact, it's just beginning as sharks begin to head for the stricken vessel and those who float precariously in the open seas. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying shark attack on Teresa Britton while lost at sea. Welcome to Final Affliction. It was Friday, July 3, 1959, and 27-year-old Teresa Britton boarded the Colombian cargo ship re-enactments. She, along with 48 other passengers, were traveling on the freighter across the Caribbean Sea, but they would never reach their destination. Tragedy was about to strike the Colombian barge and all those who sailed in her. After it left the Colombian port of Cartagena, one of the major ports on Colombia's northern coast, the re-enactments headed westwards towards Panama. They hadn't gone far into their journey when disaster struck. At only 90 miles out to sea, there was a problem. Something ignited the 22,000 gallons of petrol on board, and the ship burst into flames. A series of explosions rocked the freighter. The loud bangs and shattered glass sent the passengers and crew diving for cover. A 19-month-old girl was one of the first casualties of the stricken vessel. She was killed instantly as fire engulfed the barge. People ran to the edge of the ship as it began to take on water. It would be a matter of hours before the re-enactments would be at the bottom of the Caribbean Sea. Captain Orestes Howard ordered the launching of the lifeboat, but it was chaotic on board the ship. A series of 10 explosions rang out, each one threatening to kill the passengers on board. The flames grew bigger. The burning of the fuel intensified. The heat was immense, the flames reaching high into the sky. Some passengers leapt into the sea, leaping for cover. Others, like Teresa Britton, managed to climb into the lifeboat. As the ship began to go down, people scrambled to hold on to anything they could to stay afloat in the wide-open seas. Debris from the ship floated on the surface. The passengers clung to whatever they could find. They formed a life raft, enabling some to climb out of the water. Others pulled themselves onto wooden boxes. The flames from the ship soared upwards. They were spotted by another ship more than 10 miles away. Captain Theodore Bush was in charge of a German freighter named Essen. He was sailing the ship across the Caribbean Sea towards Panama when he saw the flames. The origin of the fire was below the horizon, but judging by the size and color of the bright yellow flames, he could tell that it was an open fire and likely a vessel on fire. He sped forwards to offer assistance, but his help would arrive too late for some. The passengers and crew had fought to escape the burning ship, but now they faced a new terror. Alfonso Payeras was desperately clinging onto a floating box. He and 5 other men held onto the same box and watched in disbelief as the cargo ship burned ferociously, sinking ever lower in the water. Salt water stung their eyes. Their arms burned as they gripped the box. They could feel the heat from the flames, the warmth on their faces. They needed to stay together. If help was to come, they needed to remain calm and stick together. But as the men held onto the debris, something lurked beneath them. Ever since the first explosion, sharks had been drawn to the commotion. They homed in on the wreckage, searching for an easy meal. They may have feasted on the bodies of those who had already died in the initial blast. The smell of blood, of fresh blood, enticed them closer. It was only a matter of time before they would attack. To his horror, Alfonso heard the man next to him cry out. He glanced around. There was a swirl in the water, and the man was gone. Alfonso shouted. The sea around him boiled red. He tried to climb up out of the water. Something was coming for them. Panic filled the survivors. There wasn't enough room on the lifeboat. Those who floated in the sea were in a precarious position as their legs dangled beneath them. They couldn't see underwater. They couldn't see the sharks circling below, but they knew they were there. They knew they were being hunted, and terror gripped them. As the hours passed, more and more sharks appeared. The survivors tried to fend them off. pushing at their snouts as they broke through the water, whacking them with whatever they had, an oar, some broken debris, or kicking them with their feet. But the sharks were becoming more frenzied. They had a taste for human flesh, and they wanted more. Teresa Britton sat on the side of the lifeboat, scanning the horizon. A shadow appeared below the water's surface, just off the bow. It torpedoed towards the lifeboat. In a split second, the shark had broken through the surface of the water and launched itself at Teresa, its huge mouth wide open, its eyes rolled back, ready for impact. It clamped its jaws around the young woman, seizing her in its grip and pulling her into the water. It had happened so quickly. There was no time for Teresa to react, no time to fight off the shark. It had appeared from nowhere, snatching Teresa from outside the water. All Teresa managed to do was to let out a shriek before she was torn from her seat. The others in the lifeboat rushed to the edge, leaning over to try and grab her, but Teresa had disappeared underwater. She was likely dead within seconds. The shark's serrated teeth and its powerful bite would have been devastating. The impact likely knocked the air from Teresa's lungs before she was dragged downwards. The shipwreck survivors were traumatized by the events unfolding. They could do nothing but wait and fight off any sharks they spotted coming at them. But spotting them became more and more difficult as the light faded. And as hour after hour passed, their hopes of rescue faded. The survivors had witnessed 5 people die during the disaster. 2 of those had been pulled underwater by sharks. The others had died in the ship's explosions, including the 19-month-old toddler. Despite powering full steam ahead, it would be 8 hours before the Essen made it on site. Sharks pose a significant threat to the survivors of shipwrecks. They are drawn to the sound of the commotion as people enter the water, the screaming and shouting, the splashing at the water's surface. They can sense fear from those struggling in the water, trying to stay afloat or grab onto something. They are drawn to the blood from injured survivors. They can detect 1 drop of blood in 100 liters or 25 gallons of water and can detect it from up to 3 miles away. That means sharks from all over can make a beeline for shipwreck survivors. And as time goes on, fish gather beneath floating debris. These fish, as prey species, attract sharks to the area. After hypothermia and drowning, shark attacks are the most common reasons for deaths following a shipwrecking. When the Essen ship arrived, the crew could see the devastation that had occurred. The Rio Altrato was low in the water and would be at the bottom of the ocean in 2 more hours. Its fires were still raging. Fuel from its cargo spilled into the Caribbean Sea, a fuel slick that would disperse over many miles. Debris floated on the surface of the ocean. Men clung to floating boxes. A man-made life raft bobbed up and down. Passengers sprawled on its surface. The lifeboat was full to the brim with passengers, men, women, and children, huddled together for warmth and protection. The survivors had endured hell. Against all odds, they had survived a grueling 8 hours in the water, haunted by the loss of their fellow passengers to the jaws of prowling sharks. On arrival, the crew of the Essen immediately lowered their powered life raft. They set about retrieving the shipwrecked survivors from the sea, hauling them aboard, visibly shaken and suffering from hypothermia. 13 of the survivors were in need of hospital treatment. 10 people were missing. 7 of them were passengers. The remaining were crew. They may have gone down with the ship, or they may have succumbed to the same fate as Teresa. They were never seen again. The Essen powered towards mainland Panama, and the Colombian survivors were treated for their ordeal. It had been a harrowing experience. It had been a tragedy for so many. 11 hours after the initial explosion, the Rio Altrato sank to the bottom of the Caribbean Sea, taking with it the lives of many. A terrifying way to meet your final affliction.